Hello everybody and welcome to Easy 11 Plus Lesson 3, and this week we're going to be focusing on differential calculus. Only joking, on verbal reasoning. A big welcome to you whether you're here on YouTube, whether you're watching on Facebook, in the 11 Plus Journey, in the Independent School 11 Plus group, or in the Cadwallader Quest group, or whether you've come from anywhere else on the internet. It's wonderful to have you here. As always, the worksheet for today's lesson is down below in the video description if you're watching on YouTube, or above my head in the video description if you're watching on Facebook. If you find these videos useful, please click like, and please subscribe to the channel. In this way you help to support me in what I do and helping other people find out about these lessons, but you also help yourself by getting notifications about new videos that I post on this channel. Right, okay, enough time talking about irrelevant things. Let's get started. So, when we're talking about verbal reasoning, I first of all want to start off by talking about the 3 pillars of verbal reasoning technique in 11 plus exams. And if you think about these 3 things throughout, then you'll be in a really good position to do any test that might confront you. So the first thing is to have really good systems for answering questions. You might think the first thing is to know words, but I don't think it's the first thing. I think the most important thing is to have a really solid technique so that you know how to work through a question really well and deal with whatever there might be in it. And if you've got good systems, you can apply them to all different kinds of question. The second thing, which is really important, is that you're good at dealing with words that you don't know. Because however good your vocabulary, you're going to encounter a whole load of unfamiliar words when you're doing verbal reasoning practice and when you're doing exams. And that's the point. They deliberately include words that lots of people won't know in order to see how you respond to them logically. Do you panic and stare at the page for 5 minutes, or do you think through the question and find the best possible answer? So that was number 2. And the third thing was not wasting time. Because what a lot of people do is they get stuck on particular questions and don't finish the test or rush the other answers. And almost always in reasoning tests, each question is worth 1 mark. So it's much better to move past a question that's difficult or have a go at it but not waste time and then do well in the rest of the test than to try and do everything perfectly and get a poor mark overall. So those 3 things, which I'm going to keep coming back to in this lesson, having really good systems, dealing with uncertainty and words that you don't know, and not wasting time. Right, bearing those 3 things in mind, let's go into the main part of the lesson. So this is the worksheet that many of you will have had a go at already. If you haven't tried the worksheet yet, don't worry about it. It's there linked in the description. You can have a go after the lesson. If you're rewatching this lesson later on YouTube, then this will be a really good time to pause the video and have a go at the first 3 questions before I talk about them. Okay, so we always start with the question, of course, which may sound obvious, but a lot of people plunge in without looking at it properly. And this says, underline the 2 words. So don't circle them, don't box them, underline them. Simple, but make sure you read it. The 2 words, 1 from each group. Now I'm just going through circling and underlining. This is something that I strongly recommend you also do when you do reasoning tests or indeed any other kind of test. Because just by doing this, it forces you to focus on the details of the question and not misunderstand it, that are closest to being opposite in meaning, and that gets a big box because it is the most important word in this question. How many people see a question about opposites and go in looking for words that are similar to each other and lose all the marks in that section? How many people do the opposite? Lots. Don't make this mistake. Last thing I want to point out is the word closest. Why is this important? This means that you will not always find a perfect opposite, a perfect antonym, okay? So we're not always talking about pairs of words like inside, outside, over, under. Sometimes we're talking about words that are almost opposites, but not quite. So you've got to be quite open-minded. Right, enough of that. Let's charge into answering the questions. I know that last week I spent an hour doing maths. We're not going to do that today, promise. Right, okay. So I spoke about systems. So you might be tempted just to charge in and go for the answer that you think is right. But what happens if there's a better answer in there? So let's be systematic. And when you're used to these systems, you can do them really quickly in an exam. So we're going to start by looking at the word leave on the left. Now, we're now going to look at the right-hand side and consider each of the options in relation to the word leave. So, leave and depart. Well, those have almost exactly the same meaning. So, it can't be depart. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to cross this out. Now, in a test, you wouldn't do this because you've got to consider the other options on the left. But because I can rub out easily, it makes things easy. Okay, leave, cease. So, cease means, of course, as you know, stop. And that really doesn't have anything particularly to do with leaving. I suppose if you leave a place, you do cease to do whatever you were doing there. But not that closely connected. And anyway, it would have a similar meaning. Leave, travel. Again, there's a vague connection, but not opposites. So it doesn't match any of those, which means that leave is clearly not going to be part of our answer. So we can cross that out, and that we really can cross out. These, of course, were just temporary cross-outs. We're going to go back to another word. Now, there's something else that I should have done, actually, before I started with this question, which I'm going to talk about now, which is when you look at an option on the left, before you start plunging into the right-hand side, it's worth just stopping and thinking, what are some likely opposites to begin? So begin. Begin is a verb, to begin something, so to end, to finish, to complete, something like that. Begin, it doesn't really work as an adjective. It doesn't work as a noun. You don't really have the begin of something, you have the beginning. So, quite straightforward, right? Begin, depart. Arrive and depart would be opposites. Not really. Leaving, departing is not the opposite of beginning. Begin, cease. Hang on, to begin something, to cease something, to stop it. So those go really well. They are really good opposites. So we can be almost certain that's the answer. So I'm going to underline them, but you don't want to just go right, done, next question, unless you're in a real rush, which you shouldn't be if you work systematically in a test. You want to check that you haven't made a mistake, there isn't something better out there. So begin, travel, no, definitely not. Okay. And now we're quickly going to check exit. Exit, the opposite of that would be something like entrance, if it's a noun, or enter, if it's a verb. To exit, to enter, the exit, the entrance. Is there anything like that? Depart, cease, travel. No, there isn't. So we can be quite confident that our answers are begin and cease. Now, however, what happens if you didn't know the word cease? So that here was a word that you just didn't know. You don't know what it means, you probably heard it somewhere, you've got some vague sense that maybe you kind of know it, but you just can't quite bring it to mind in the stress of an exam. This is a typical situation in a reasoning test. So just very quickly, what would you do about that? So we'd look through leave, and we'd say, well, leave, depart, everything, leave, travel, not really connected. Leave, cease, kind of maybe, but we don't know what it means. So I might, rather than crossing out, just put a little cross beneath it to say I don't think it's that. Begin, depart, begin, cease, begin, travel. Well, begin doesn't go with depart, doesn't go with travel really. So I'm not really sure, I'm not sure about that. Okay, exit, it's not really the opposite of depart or travel. So you could say we got nowhere here, but what have we actually done? We've worked out that those words on the left don't belong with depart or travel. So our opposite word is almost certainly going to be cease. That's actually going to be one of the answers. So now we've got to do it in reverse and say, here's a word we don't know. Which of these options on the left do we think it's most likely to be the opposite of? And now, if you really completely don't know cease, you're a bit stuck, but at least you've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting the right answer, which is much better than where you were when you started. You've at least got 1/2 of the answer. But perhaps now you can think about cease and go, to cease, cease, to leave, to cease, I don't know, to begin, I begin the exercise, I cease the exercise, the play begins, the play ceases, that rings a bell. And you might have a chance of getting the answer. So, basically, if you're unsure about a word, be systematic, eliminate as many options as you possibly can so you've got the best possible chance, and then sensibly give the best answer that you can. Don't stare at the page, and don't just guess randomly out of all the options that are there. Be smart, choose a sensible middle ground. Okay. Ponder, consider, deliberate, accidental, improper, philosophize. Hang on a sec. Did you read that like I did? Ponder, consider, deliberate. Or did you read that as deliberate? So this is something absolutely crucial in, crucial? That sounded like Jonathan Wass. Absolutely crucial in 11 plus exams, which is that you have to be very sensitive to words that can have different meanings and perhaps also different sounds. And when they can have different sounds, that can also help to guide you towards different meanings. So deliberate is a verb, meaning to think about something. I deliberated over the question and then chose this. Deliberate means on purpose. It was a deliberate action. It wasn't an accident. So, super important. Right, we'll come to that. So, ponder. Pretty sure that's the word that you're going to know. To ponder something, to think about it. Okay. Accidental, improper, philosophize. Hans, not now. I know you're a philosopher. Bye-bye. Sorry, where were we? Ponder, goodness me, accidental, improper. So to ponder, to think about, isn't really anything to do with accidental or improper. Philosophize, so even if you don't know that word, you can probably guess what it means. It means to think philosophically about something, to do philosophy. That's very similar to ponder. So basically, none of these are opposites of ponder. So ponder, we can get rid of. Consider. To consider, to accidental. Well, that's just accidental is an adjective. It isn't even a verb. To improper, again, it's an adjective. To philosophize, that's similar to consider. So none of those are like consider. I'm moving a bit faster now because you'll have got the hang of the method I'm showing. Right, deliberate. So what would be the opposite of to deliberate? Again, this thought process. It would be maybe, I don't know, just to rush into something, to snap at an answer. I'm trying to think even, there must be a one word that does it. Probably you can come up with one. Anyway, let's see. So to deliberate, well, the first two here aren't even verbs, accidental and improper. To philosophize, no, that's similar. So it looks, if you haven't read these options properly, as though none of these will match. But remember, deliberate, deliberate. Deliberate meaning on purpose, which of course is the opposite of accidental, not of improper or philosophize. So that's such an easy thing to miss in a test, but it's so important. Look out for words that can have different meanings depending on what part of speech they are. So to deliberate is a verb, deliberate is an adjective, meaning on purpose, and that can sound different. Deliberate, deliberate. Okay, onwards. Like, compliment, and attack. Well done to everybody who's written the correct answers there. There's a whole queue of deliberate and accidental. Superb. These aren't the very hardest questions ever, but I think they're good questions for just showing the core techniques and getting into a nice rhythm of solving VR questions, verbal reasoning questions. Okay, like. Now let's think about like for a second. So what part of speech is that? So I like you, that's a verb, but you can also, a YouTube video can have a like, hint, a video can have a like, and that's a noun. If two things are like, that means that they are similar. So it can also be an adjective, so like can be a whole load of things, and we need to remember that as we look at the other side. So like address. Address can also be more than one thing. You can have an address, so, you know, address of my company, 17 Woodside Road, that kind of thing. You can address somebody, and hello, lovely to meet you, please go away now. That'd be a way of addressing somebody, and so on. So, anyway, it isn't really opposite to like, so I've spent too long on that for no reason, sorry. Right, okay. To like, to defame. Now, defame is a word that it's quite possible you don't know. So, I'm going to say we're just not quite sure there. Defame is a question mark word. Like, hit, no. So like, no real reason to think that it is, but I don't really know what defame is doing. Compliment. Okay, compliment. You can pay someone a compliment, noun. What would the opposite of compliment be? Maybe something like insult. You can compliment somebody, and the opposite would be something like to insult them. Or if you compliment a person to another person, so if you say, looking at the comments here, let's pick someone out, let's say Arjun is a brilliant guy, I'm also complimenting him to somebody else. But if I say to somebody else, Yusuf, just makes trouble on the channel, then I'm doing the opposite of complimenting to somebody else. Maybe I'm criticizing him, something like that. Okay, is there anything that goes out? Address, no. Hit, no. Defame, we're not quite sure about. But let's think about the word defame. What's it got in it? Fame. What is fame? So it's when you're well known, when you have a reputation. So D is a negative. Okay? So if I defame, it's normally a negative, if I defame somebody, I'm somehow damaging their fame, damaging their reputation. So that does sound quite opposite to compliment. So I'm not sure about this, but if I can't find a better answer, I'm really going to be inclined to go with compliment and defame. So always think carefully about words you don't know, pull them apart, look what's inside them, and see whether that might help. Compliment and hit, no. Attack, address, not really. Attack, defame. Well, we're not sure about defame, but if it does mean to do someone down, to criticize them, then actually looking at stop in the comments. I hope if that's aimed to me, I'm sorry. You can always disconnect. So blah, blah, blah. Compliment, defame. No, attack, defame. It would be similar if it had that meaning. Attack and hit, again, these are quite similar. So nothing else works as well as compliment and defame. So we can stop having the dotted line and we can have the solid line. So even when you don't know a word properly, it's amazing what you can do. Right, powering on to the next section. Again, if you're rewatching this, this would be a great time to pause the video and have a go at these questions. Right, underline the word on the right that would belong with the words in either set of brackets. So, fountain, source. So these are objects, places that something comes from, possibly a liquid. Let's look on the right-hand side. Pipe, okay, that's also somewhere that liquid can come from. Potently, well, this is an adverb, so it doesn't really go with fountain or source at all, and it isn't something, it just doesn't match. So that cannot match the words in the left-hand set of brackets, so it can't be the answer. Fountain, source, gutter. You wouldn't normally think of a gutter as being something that water comes from. You think it as being something that collects water, but can't completely rule it out. Well, no, well, he did it well, that isn't... Hang on a second. Isn't a well also a place that you can take water out of? So actually that would go. So be really, really careful. It's like I said before, this word doesn't change its pronunciation, but it's got two completely different meanings. Well as an adverb, he answered the question well. Well as a noun, meaning deep hole, pull the bucket up, have your water. So that might match. So we've only ruled one out there. Effectively, successfully. Okay, these are clearly adverbs, they end in ly. Pipe, no, does not go. Gutter, no. Effectively, successfully, well. Yes, these are all adverbs describing someone who has done something well, in a good way. So that is clearly the answer. Right, so there was a big trap, potentially, in that question. If you just got hung up on one meaning of well, you have to be very alert to both. And in fact, when you've got questions like this, where you have to choose a word to match two or more sets, often it's going to be testing precisely this skill. Can you spot words which have different meanings in different situations? Right, okay. I realise I didn't do my thing of going through the question and underlining and circling words. It's because I feel in a bit of a hurry after spending so long on the first question. But I think this is a relatively straightforward one to understand anyway, so oops, but I won't worry too much. Right, next bit. Flee, run. Okay, they've got a clear meaning: to flee the scene, to run away from the scene, so on and so forth. To retreat, yep, that goes with it. To waver, to be kind of unsure. It's not the same as running away, really. I don't think there's much chance of that being the answer here. To fly, to flee, to run, to fly. Yeah, to fly away, to run away, to flee away. They go together really well. Butterfly, no. Flee, run, butterfly, you can't butterfly away from somewhere. At least it would be nice if you could, but I don't think you can. Right, so we've reduced it down to two. Moth, beetle, both insects, fly, that is a clear match. This was quite an easy one. Okay, and again, you've got different parts of speech. You've got flee and run, verbs. You've got moth and beetle, nouns, things. And so you need a word which can be either a verb or a noun, and that's fly. I reckon everybody got that. Will G says, how long is left? Well, I don't know exactly, but I'm going to move as quickly as possible. Maybe another 25, 30 minutes, I reckon. Okay. Decline, demur. Demur? That's an unusual word, and perhaps you don't know it. Rubbish, waste. Okay, decline and demur. Now, decline can mean several things. It can mean to go down, so the stock market declined, meaning the value of shares in companies went down. I decline your offer, it means I say no to it. Thank you, not my cup of tea. And there are some more specialist meanings as well to do with grammar, for example. So there are a few things this might go with. That's a bit vague, so let's skip to the other pair for the moment. Rubbish and waste. Okay, so rubbish can be a verb as well, like you rubbish someone's idea, you say, that's a stupid idea, I'm not going to listen to the rest of what you have to say. But rubbish and waste would more commonly, and verb can be waste can be a verb as well, to waste something. But they've got quite different meanings as verbs. They've got very similar meanings as nouns. Rubbish and waste are both things that go in a bin or skip. So, rubbish and waste, probably nouns, meaning that stuff. Refuse, reject, ditch, skip. Hang on. Don't really match any of those. A skip is where you put the rubbish and the waste. It isn't the rubbish or waste itself. Likewise, a ditch. You can ditch something, but that doesn't really go with to rubbish something. Really stuck. What could this be? And then we remember question 4, and well. And of course it's the same issue, because this word here is not what it seems. Well, it is, but it's not just what it seems. Because this word is refuse, but it's also refuse, which means rubbish, waste, stuff you throw away. A slightly less usual word. So if you know that, then you'll immediately jump towards this and go, this is the only one that matches rubbish and waste, so it must be the answer. But let's say that you don't know the word refuse. And so you're left with refuse and reject, and decline, and whatever this demur is. So refuse and reject. To decline something is definitely to refuse it, so that's a really good match. But to decline something and reject it, that also goes. So to be honest, if you don't know the word refuse, you're left with a 50-50 guess between these two. But a 50-50 guess is much better than a 1 in 4 25% guess. So it's still a much better place to be in than just guessing at the beginning because you don't know one word. Don't do that, think logically, narrow your options. Of course, if you know the word refuse, you'll get the answer. Right, next one. Line, file, okay? So these are probably going to be nouns. A file, so if you're standing in file, means you're standing one person after the other. If you're in a line, same kind of thing. You can line something, particularly if you put, cloth or something in it, but that's very different from to file something, which means to, to rub it down. So nouns here, probably things. Okay, line, file, strip, yep. Contention, let's just say that you know this word to save a bit of time now. Contention meaning, actually no, let's not say you know it because it's quite likely you don't. So let's say you're not sure about that. Fight, no. Row, no. Oh, what about row? Okay, line, file, row, they go well. So strip goes, row goes, contention we really aren't sure about. Okay. Argument, dispute. Strip, no. Okay. Contention, argument, dispute. Ooh, I've just realised something. Oh no, I haven't realised something. It's okay. Phew, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Argument, dispute. They do in fact go with contention, which is a really unusual word. But even if you don't know the word contention, you should be able to see that they go with row. Having an argument, having a row, having a dispute, having a row, and row is also a line or file. So that's clearly the answer. And even if you don't know contention, row stands out as the answer, so you can be pretty certain it's the correct response. Contention have a very similar meaning to argument, dispute. It can also kind of mean a point of view, my contention is that. But you can get this answer even if you don't know that word. Right, powering on. Okay, I really like this question, which probably makes me odd, but anyway, I think it's really interesting. So, I hope you found this interesting as well. You get some of these kind of mathy kinds of tasks in VR exams. It isn't really verbal reasoning, you're not reasoning with words, but it is about being systematic, the kind of thing I spoke about at the top when I said the most important thing is having good systems. Now, there's really one good system that works for questions just like this, and you can use very similar systems for other questions that are like it. So the lessons you take from this will apply in all sorts of situations, even if you don't have a question that's precisely like this one. Oh yeah, very well-wanted user who said, I think it would be row, as you could have a row like when you argue, but also a row like in a line. Perfect. Farouk says, what does contention mean, please? Yep, we've covered that, but the really important thing is that if in an exam you find yourself saying, what does contention mean, help? Instead, you work systematically through the rest and find out that it doesn't really matter. Beatrice Lee says, I love this question. I'm really glad. I didn't write it specifically for your pleasure, but if it brought you enjoyment, then that is a truly wonderful thing. Okay, back to the question. Right, the method for this is you can apply in various different ways. It's really simple and it just works every single time. Let's have a look at either these words or these numbers. And in fact, you can start with either. Let's start with the words down here. Being able to draw on the screen and then just get rid of it like this. It just makes life so easy when I'm doing this, especially when everything doesn't crash and fail like last week. Okay, looking at the words here. Let's just look at the first letters. Do we see any patterns? B, F, S, S, R. Aha! There are two words here that begin with the letter S. And we have to match word codes to number codes So if two words begin with the letter S and no other pair of words begin with the same letter, then we need to look for two number codes that begin with the same digit. By the way, I'm going to say, if possible, I'm going to say number to refer to the whole number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to say digit to refer to part of it, like 1, 2, or 4, just so I'm clear. So looking through here, we've got beginning with 1, 7, 1, 5, and 4. I've done these dots and they're going to be really hard to rub out now. No, I'm getting better at this. Okay, 1 appears twice. So what does this show us? Exactly. It shows us that S is 1. So what I'm going to do up here, I'm going to write in, it's a real test of my ability to write small on the screen. There we are. That's S. So we know that of these two numbers, one of them is sac and one of them is seer. But which is which? Okay? Well, let's do some more exploring and find out. So, what other patterns can we see? Let's think about the last letters of these words. E, D, K, R, E. The two words that begin with E, end with E. And looking up here, there are two numbers that end with 2. So, we can see that 2 is E. Okay, great, as far as it goes. But does that help us with the other words? Are there any other places here where we see the number 2? Of course there are. Here, the number 2. So this code here begins, right, I'm going to have to just risk putting my hand on the screen and make sure, hope the world doesn't fall apart. No, world's still here. Right, C. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is the code for the word that begins in SE, and that is seer. So that's our first answer. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if that word is seer, then 3 is A, and 4 is R. Okay, and now we've got some other words here. So in the next word we've got two 2's. That's EE. Which word has two E's in the middle? It's feed, so that must be feed. Let's tick off the words I've used, so it just makes life easier. Okay, any other 2's? No, okay. 3's, 3 is A, as we can see on the left-hand side here. Yep, okay. In fact, we know that one already because it's the other one beginning in S. Sorry, I've been a bit slow on that. 1, 3, 9, 6. Oh, that's horrible handwriting. It looks like 4. I'm going to do that again. First tip for 11 plus, have better handwriting than me. Right, okay, anyway, 1, 3, 9, 6. Oh no, we got other ones now. We know that 9 is C and so on, but blah, blah, blah. We fully don't need all this. 3 is A over here. These both have A as a second letter, but we know that 9 from over here is C. So 4392 is the one that ends in ace. That's race. And so this last one here, bake must be 5, 3, 6, 2, and there you got it. Okay, so that works really, really well. Whoever's writing the same comment 1,000 times, please don't do it. Please, please, I beg you. Plead for mercy. Give the comments thread a rest. There are worse things in the world. Anyway, okay. With a question like this, I'm not going to redo the whole thing, but I just want to point out you don't need to start with the first letter. You can also start with the second letter. So for example, let's look at the second letters here. We can see that we've got A, E, A, E, A. So we've got 3 second letter A's and 2 second letter E's. So if there are 3 numbers up, oh dear, I think we're okay. I think I've just, yeah. Crumbs. Is that going to work? Yes, it's okay. I just jogged a cable. Okay, if we've got 3 numbers up here with the same second number, done it again. Right, I'm just going to rearrange this for a second. Bear with me. That should come back on about, please come back on. Please come back on. No. It always happens. Something like this. Right, excuse me a second. I'm just going to work to try and make this thing come through onto my main monitor. This might be something to chop out of the video after it's gone live. Right, please, yes, good, we're back. My apologies. I think I better not move the screen anymore. We got three numbers up here that have the number 3 as the second digit. So they must be the 3 words that have A as the second letter. So you could start like that. And that way you identify that 3 is A, so the other 2 words must have E as the second letter, so 2 is E. And then you go through and put those letters in the other number codes, and that way the answer pops out. I can't tell you how relieved I feel after the technical nightmare of last time to know that that was just a cable that I needed to jiggle around a bit. Whew. Okay, onwards to the next question. But before we look at this, let's have a quick break for the and the tip of the week is, why am I doing this? It's like I'm preaching or something. Anyway, the religion of 11+. Okay, no, it's not that important. Tip of the week is, don't neglect the basics. Now, what I mean by this is that as people get confident and they start to enjoy applying their knowledge in harder and harder questions, it's often easy to forget about the simple questions that you used to spend your time worrying about and now you think are the easiest things in the world. Someone sent me an email today to say that there's a really difficult maths paper that I send out quite late on 11+ Lifeline for people doing scholarships and so on. And someone emailed to say, my daughter got 85% in this and she's so proud that she wanted to tell you about it. And that's an absolutely amazing mark in that paper. It's called Peter's Patronising Paper Parrot, in case you were 11+ Lifeline person. Anyway, and my first thought was, wow, that's fantastic. But I was also thinking that when people get into that situation, what can often happen then is that they're so busy working on the really hard stuff that they start making lots of little mistakes in the easier questions that they now take completely for granted that they used to think about a lot more. And this is one of the really big dangers. So the more confident you get, the more you practice with harder and harder questions, the more careful you need to be that your core skills are really good and that you don't start making little mistakes because you're overconfident and a bit careless. So however good you get, still practice the easy stuff. The same thing applies to English. For example, with comprehension, you can really, especially if you're doing written comprehension type, you have to actually write out an answer to the question. It's really easy to get into a situation where you're practicing kind of long, sort of paragraph length questions worth sort of 6 or 7 marks. And you kind of forget to practice the simple ones where you just have to make one point really quickly. And what can happen is you're so used to practicing the big stuff where you've got to write loads that you actually start writing way too much and being far too complicated with the simple questions, and you waste time and you actually lose marks overall in the test. So keep working on the simple stuff, don't lose track of it. It's a simple point, it's a really important one. That's what I try to do with these tips of the week. Okay. Let's go back into the paper and finish it off. We're really getting on towards the end of the questions that I've set here. And I think these ones will be a bit quicker anyway. So, fill in the gap so that the word on the right has the same or almost the same meaning as the word on the left. And of course, the crucial word here is same. So you're looking for synonyms, a word that I'm sure you know, or things that are very, very close to synonyms. Someone says, that happened to me in school. Yeah, I think that's talking about the tip of the week. I'm glad that it matches your experience. So, same meanings. Tiny. Before we get lost in the letters on the right, I'm just covering with my hand, but you can't see me doing that. There we are. Before we get caught up in this stuff, just think about the word on the left. So, tiny. What's similar to tiny? Tiny, small, very small, petite. Just have those thoughts buzzing around your head before you focus too much on the letters here on the right. Now, you might be seeing this already, but let's say you don't see it. And some people naturally see these things quickly. And for some people, it takes a lot of processing. And I'm not really that convinced by this style of question because I think that the instinct for spotting these things only has a certain amount to do with most of what we call intelligence. But anyway, leave that to one side. I'm not the person setting these exams. You've got to do them anyway. And one thing you can do, and it seems like a big slog, but if you get used to doing it quickly, it doesn't take too long. You just spin through the alphabet, so you kind of ayin, bin, kin, din, blah, 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 blah. And then maybe you get to M, and you think, min. I'm going to use capitals just because my handwriting's bad. Nothing wrong with that. Min, of course, min is a really likely one because we used to words like mini for tiny, mini, minute. Min. Okay. What could go after N? Mince, not really. Quite likely to be a vowel after a consonant. What have you got? We got A, E, I, O, U, Y. Mina, no, min, mini, minute. Mini, now it could be very much anything. Let's pop to the end. UL, we know words that end with U. L often has an E on the end. Minuscule. So, playing around like that, sometimes doing it in a kind of guided way, you think, well, what's likely to come after N? A vowel's pretty likely, could be other things like S, T, but vowels are likely, run through the vowels. I often goes in words like mini. The M we got really just by flying through lots of letters, but doing it really fast, which is something to practice. At the end we guessed the E, but it was a likely guess. Could be something like S as well, of course, or T, but E was a pretty likely one to try, and you could have tried the other ones if that hadn't worked out. And then the rest fell into place because you recognised the word. So, again, having really good systems, dealing with uncertainty, these are the crucial things here. Now, go to the next one. Reflect. Reflect. So that's like when you've got okay. But what has the same meaning as reflect? Like mirror, maybe? This is really hard. It just doesn't come to me. So, third thing on my list at the beginning, not wasting time. You've looked at it, it doesn't come to you, you know you might spend ages staring at it, don't take the risk. Move on to the next question. Enrage. Oh, it rages me when, I don't know, when the computer stops working. Pretty low level rage there. This is not the time for rage, this is time for calm and patient enjoyment of 11. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? Don't listen to me. Enrage. Okay, so sure you know that word? To make angry. I blank F. Okay, so what often comes after I at the beginning of a word? What's the most common thing? Of course, it's N. Infringement, not really getting me anywhere. What about a vowel? It's after a consonant, always worth trying vowels. A, E, I, O, U. I was thinking flame. Inflame is to mean to enrage as well, but it doesn't fit. Okay, nice try. Then we're thinking, okay, what else? E, infect, nothing to do with rage really there. I, infiltrate, nothing to do with it. No. O, infor, no. U, fury is like rage. In fury, but if you're carrying on a word, the Y is likely to be an I. That tends to happen when you've got Y ending words that then have a suffix on something that carries them on. Infuriate, infuriate. To enrage, to infuriate. So again, it's about being systematic, didn't take too long. Right, now let's say we got to the end of the exam, so then we say, oh, I'm going to come back to the one I didn't get. Reflect. Oh, I was thinking about mirror. Hang on, to reflect. That also means to think about something. To reflect on something means to think carefully. Moderate, no. Oh, meditate means to reflect. Now, well, I haven't shown you some magic technique there, but probably the most important thing to show you from that is how sometimes when you don't see something, what you need is just to go away and think about something completely different. And then really often, when you look at it again, something pops into your mind. But there's a big mistake that I made there the first time, which is that when I looked at this word, I didn't apply the lesson that I've been teaching throughout this test, this lesson, blah, blah. This lesson I've been teaching throughout this lesson. It's going on too long. I'm losing my mind. Which is that you have to consider the multiple meanings of a word. So reflect, yes, of course, it can mean two things in a mirror, but it can also mean to think about something. And that's pretty obvious if you think about the word, if you reflect on the word reflect. Teacher joke. So just don't get impatient, don't get stressed. Take the time to look for multiple meanings of words. Okay, we're getting towards the end. Have no fear, whoever it was who said, when will this end? The answer is quite soon. Okay, let's make this so. That's it. Beautifully centered on the screen, and it didn't go dead. A four-letter word can be added to the capital letters, making a longer word which fits logically within the sentence. There's a grammatical mistake in this, a very small one, but this word which should be that. I'm not going to explain why now, because it's a really, really technical point in English, and a lot of people don't even follow the rule anymore, but suffice to say, I made a mistake. Anyway, a four-letter word can be added to the capital letters, making a long word that fits logically within the sentence. Write a four-letter word in the gap. And we've got an example here. Water poured from all the downs, and the answer is pout. Water poured from all the downspouts. So, four-letter word, that's really important. You might find answers, possible answers, that don't have a four-letter word. They will not be correct. Can be added to the capital letters, making a longer word that fits logically within the sentence. There are a lot of words there, but there's something important here I want to point out. Fits logically within the sentence. That's important because you might find possible answers that make a sentence that's kind of nonsense. And you're not looking to do that. You want something that makes sense in the light of everything else that's there. You come up with a possible answer that does go with the letters but doesn't make sense in the sentence, it will not be right and it will get a cross and no mark. Write the four-letter word in the gap. Not in the gap between letters, in the gap here. I hope that's obvious. I think this is a pretty standard way of phrasing this kind of question, so it's just the way it is. Okay, the prisoner was sled to the bench. Now, it's really like you'll look at these and nothing will be obvious. You need to think about it more. There's a reason why they don't just give you the word without the rest of the sentence. That's because the rest of the sentence matters. The prisoner was something to the bench. Well, if the prisoner was just on the bench, then it wouldn't be was to the bench. So what would you do with a prisoner to a bench? Or not you, but what might be done to a prisoner in relation to a bench? The only thing I really think of is that there'd be some kind of tied to it. A little sinister, but so the prisoner was something to the bench. Now we're going to start thinking about options sled. So now we think, okay, what happens if there's a gap before the word? Sled. The prisoner was sled to the bench. Sled. Nothing comes to mind. What happens if we think the prisoner was something led to the bench? Well, ed is quite a common ending, of course, to verbs, so it's likely that ed is the end, and led is also quite common. Called, for example. Shackled to the bench. So that would be S-H-A-C-K. And that is a word, to hack at something. Hack. Prisoner was shackled to the bench. So that's the kind of way you get the answer. It's hard to work out the answer to these logically. What you can do is think carefully about the meaning of the sentence and then think about each possible gap within the letters that are given to you and use those to stimulate ideas that come to mind. Okay. Mandy sled, this is another sled, we've got two sleds in a row. It's like Christmas. Mandy sled out of the room looking at her toes. Okay. I mean, it almost makes sense. You could say slid, and then it would actually work. But anyway, Mandy sled or something out of the room looking at her toes. Now, there are lots of ways of leading a room, but what does it mean if you're looking at your toes? How would you walk like that? So, if you're working at home, you can try these things, and if you're in an exam, you can think about them. So I'm walking, looking at my toes. So, chair in the way, too much screen, too much chair. So I look at my toes. It's very hard to kind of do big strides looking at my toes. It's just like the Ministry of Silly Walks. How else might I look at my toes? If I'm looking at my toes as I walk, I'm taking very little steps, probably, and sliding my feet a bit. What am I doing? I'm shuffling. And that's really by far the best word to describe a way of walking where you're going along looking at your toes. And we're straight to the answer already. Mandy shuffled out of the room. So this wasn't really a verbal question at all. It was an acting question. And that may sound like a kind of slightly flippant, silly thing to say, but I really mean it seriously, that a super important part of any sort of question where you're dealing with a situation is to imagine yourself into it and at least in your mind act it out and use that to guide you towards proper answers. Oh, well done, Farouk Kanamia. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. How about slouched? So that is a correct answer. Congratulations, you found another one. I haven't been following all the comments. It could be that someone else has found an answer as well. But yeah, so, or, ouch. Huge congratulations. That could be in one of the answers in my paper I've taken this from. It might not be. It could be you found an answer I didn't spot. Absolutely superb, thank you. The fairy lights fur in the dark hall. What do lights do? They shine out. They could something fur. But I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Lights might shine really strongly. But what else do fairy lights do? So that's why you have to read the context carefully. Why have I said fairy lights and not spotlights or something? Because fairy lights often do, they flicker, which is really the main word to describe that. So again, if you think carefully about the context, and you don't just think lights, but you think fairy lights, little Christmas tree lights, then you can get the answer, lick, really quickly. Seeing the gun, Eric, P-A-D-D. Now, pretty sure this is going to end with ed, because it's something that someone does or did, so it would be a something ed verb, pretty likely, even if not certain. Seeing the gun, Eric, oh, I can see this, Eric paused. Perfect, us is a word. Paused. Let's move on. Let's not move on, because we need a four-letter word. As I said at the beginning, sometimes you'll find an answer that works, but doesn't match all the criteria in the question. And that's a really good example. He did not pause because that doesn't give us a four-letter word over here. What else might he have done? He might have, it's difficult to think of a word ending aid, A-E-D, so it's probably a word ending A-E-D. Eric, what would you do if you saw a gun? You might go, ooh, that's nice, but it's more likely that you would go something along the lines of, or, yeah, enough for me. I'm a very, very poor actor, as you may have realised. Seeing the gun, Eric, I think he panicked. Again, be an actor. put yourself into the situation. And here's the last set of questions. This is quite I save this to the end because it's quite an easy kind of question. I just need to show you the system. In each of these sentences is a hidden 4-letter word which overlaps the end of one word and the beginning of the next. Incidentally, this is the correct way to use which. You can look it up if you're curious. Hardly anyone cares about it these days, but you know, grammar. It overlaps the end of one word and the beginning of the next. Again, it's a 4-letter word that is crucial. Write it in the answer space. And here's an example. Don't start entering the pool, and you can see the word tent is there, and that's here in the answer. Okay. Fast birds snack on slow ants all day. Try saying that 5 times quickly. Fast birds snack on slow ants all day. 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 I did it. Can you? Right. Okay. Fast birds. Now, the technique for these is really simple, and it's going to look crazily long-winded and slow. It isn't, because when you get used to it, you do this super fast. Fast birds. Asdba. Sdbi. Tabir. None of these are English words. Urds, dzn, zna. None of these are words. Can you see what I'm doing? I need to find 4-letter words. So the first word takes the last 3 letters of this word, ast, and the first ones are this, astba. Then I take the last 2 letters of this and the first 2, zdbi. And then I take the last letter. I like these words even if they don't exist. Tabir, not in English. I wouldn't be surprised if tabir was a word in some language or other. And we go on like this. Ako, kukakon, kon. Onslo, unslo. No. Loa, owan, want. And there we are. Now, I normally, oh, come on, my handwriting. I normally, as you know very well, say that you should always go on and see if there's a better answer. This kind of question is an exception to that rule. You have to find a word that's there. If you find a word that's there, then you've done it. You found an answer or the answer. So there's no need to go on. Want is a word, it is there. There is nothing else to check for. So you've done it, you don't need to check the rest, and you can move on. What a relief, how unusual. She passed the gun. Okay, I'm gonna do this more quickly. Shep, hepa, epas. Sed the edde rlue. Theb, hebu, ebun. It's quite fun doing these. Bung, ungro, hang on. Bung. That's a word. I do that to demonstrate that when you're used to doing this, it's really fast. Now, why have this method? Why not just look through and see if you find a word first? Well, my experience of these questions is that you can look at them for quite a long time and not see the answer. So you can spend 2 minutes looking at it, trying to see the word, and then you go, okay, I can't see it, I better use the system. And then you start from the beginning and do what I do. And you've wasted 2 minutes. It's much better, really, just to start by doing this method from the beginning before you've even looked for an answer in the sentence, because this way you'll have a consistent speed and you'll find it fast, and you almost certainly won't miss it, and you won't waste time trying to look for the word before you started using the technique. That's my opinion. Others are available. Cassandra, Dras, Razm, Azmi, Ledwa, Edwi, Dwi, Ithi, Phil, Hill, and with a Hill. See how quickly I got to that. It's just about being used to it and making sure we don't miss anything. Oh, there's something else I wanted to point out in here. Is it still there? Oh yeah, I wanted to point out something. I knew there was something. I haven't looked at these today. I looked at them a couple of days ago. Things slipped my mind. I wanted to point this out. Sean. S-E-A-N. It's a name. In reasoning tests like this, names will usually not be accepted as answers. Why is that? Well, if you just consider traditional English first names, then there's a fairly limited stock. But of course, if you think about the society that we live in these days, you've got people from all sorts of different cultures and languages, and you've just got enormous numbers of names. And who am I to say, looking on the right, that, for example, you know, Christopher McCabe has a common name, and Scott or Rabib have a more or less acceptable name in a verbal reasoning test? On what basis can I say that Yusuf is an answer, but Josh is not an answer? If you accept names, it just goes mad. So basically, names are normally not accepted as answers in these tests. So if you see a name as an answer, do not be tempted. Look to see if you can find something better. All I would say is if you really can't find anything better, then put the name, because maybe, I don't know, maybe just the examiner thought that should be the answer. Stuff happens. Okay, and now we're through to the end of this. So, the 3 pillars of verbal reasoning technique that I introduced at the beginning have really good systems, and I've shown you a few systems here. You'll encounter many different kinds of verbal reasoning question. I'll do more kinds of verbal reasoning questions in future sessions, by the way. It's not like this is everything I've got to say about verbal reasoning, bad luck. But even with totally different kinds of questions, once you've learnt the systems that I've taught today, you can apply them in all manner of other situations and to all kinds of other questions. Just a few basic sort of systems, just adapt them to the question. Be intelligent. If you're not intelligent, why are you even doing this? But I'm certain that you are. Everybody who studies with me is intelligent. Apart from sometimes, I think, as I look at some of the mistakes I make here, me. 2, dealing with uncertainty and unknown words. Yeah. Well, I've talked about that a bit. I've given some examples. Do not be scared by things you don't know. When you don't know a word, that is the examiner giving you an opportunity to do better than other people, because probably almost everybody else in the room isn't sure about that word either. So if you can not be sure about the word, but come to a sensible and useful answer, you will be the person who does better in this exam than all the people who did differently. And the last thing is not wasting time, which I'm doing at the moment because you want to get to your dinner. So, I'm just going to quickly skip to oh, it's gone on for hours again. Are there any quick questions? I think people want to get to dinner. It's gone on long enough. So if you've got questions you really want answered, please write them in the comments under this video, and I will come back to them on a future occasion when I've spent less long doing the lesson. So, it's been lovely to see you this time. Probably many of you are logging off already because you can tell I'm coming to the end. If you found this useful, please like the video, and of course, please subscribe to the channel. I love it when you subscribe, watching the subscriber numbers shoot up each week. It makes me so happy in my sad little life. Yeah, have a lovely week. So, see you next Tuesday, same time, same place.